Welcome to Mastering Innovation Together with Scott Schafer of Borderline and Chris Koomey of Thorben Consulting. And Scott, you have always loved the movies, and I know you've made a few movies. And so what's cooking in the Borderline movie studio these days?
We got a couple things percolating. Michael, one of my partners, is working on something that I think we're pretty excited about. But I think for us, it's a weird time. It's interesting, mastering innovation and movies in 2023. It's a really weird time in content. I mean, I think for the first time in my career, I'm more excited about the stories that we can tell for brands than almost the stories we can tell in normalized content, especially in movies, because I think, when we first started making movies in 2004 in a much different iteration, it was a vastly different world where, there was an unbelievable international appetite for, a movie that you could make between $3 to $5 million that you could pre-sell foreign territories. And there was a game plan for what that financial model of movie making is. And I think that's the tricky part about today with streaming, is that the economics of it for, people like us that would be willing to make independent film it's really not there. I mean, you've got 4 or 5 normalized, kind of streaming services that budgets are getting tighter, content's being constricted. And I think it's one of those things where it's a tough time to make a movie. I don't know that there's ever been
to be independent, right? I mean, so because Netflix has its own production company, so they're going to favor their own, and Amazon has its own production company, so they're going to favor their own.
Well, what's crazy to me is you've never had a period of accessibility to production equipment that would allow you to create and produce something at a level that, it looks like Netflix. I mean, if you look at the Netflix approved list of cameras, right? You can, if you have a Sony, S3, if you've got a FX30 or an FX3 or a 6 or a 9, you can spend, 50, 60 grand on camera equipment and have what you need. If you know how to light it, you know how to tell story, you can produce a movie that looks better than what we produced with Way of War in, 2009, 2010. So I'm always fascinated by these moments in history where the technology is providing an availability for independent outside voices to create content. But then the distribution streams, which you think should be as agnostic and as sort of universal as they've ever been, have never been more closed. That I think something will come in the next few years that will allow people to harness this technology. And you're seeing it some on YouTube, but it manifests more in like what we're doing in podcasts and, 2 people talking, 3 people talking, versus, taking 2 giant steps back and saying, okay. And I think this is something brands need to think about, is because of this availability of, production talent, production resource, and equipment, brands have the ability through sort of YouTube distribution and self-distribution to almost become their own content networks, where you're not necessarily telling the story of, you're not making, obviously, Godfather 2, but you can make a story of your brand and of your company and of your history and your ethos and your philosophy at a level that you could never make before. So I think in terms of commercial cinematography and commercial production, it's never been a more exciting time. It's just very odd to me that, the independent cinema has never sort of struggled more to get, movies out and distributed and seen. I mean, if you look at the movies that are nominated this year for Academy Awards, I mean, SNL every week makes a joke about how nobody's seen them, and they've made $45. So it's a really strange thing that I don't have a handle on, but it's something I think about a lot, of how do we harness this technology and this availability to be able to get, voices that can't get through this new studio system to be able to tell different kinds of stories.
So, and even this format of being shorter, right? Everyone 5 years ago, it had to be 40 minutes or more. It had to be, and I know you love your 4-hour podcast and all that. But part of it is getting people where they are. But at the same time, so you talk about the democratization of the big avenues. Now with YouTube, with Instagram, with all these other avenues, you can create your own distribution channel, but you just have to kind of change the financial model and change kind of your expectation of outcome.
Yeah, and I think it works better in the context of corporate storytelling than it maybe does in individual storytelling. I mean, I think you've seen this format, whether it's, what Joe Rogan does, or, Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer, what those guys do, this is a phenomenal format for that, of just people who are interesting, who, have things to talk about and say that people want to watch. But to me, it's going to evolve to a point where we're going to see this paradigm shift, where my hope is you get voices that otherwise wouldn't be making films or short films or, documentaries, that will be making them and getting them out. And that there could be some sort of economic structure that would work for them.
Because one of my nephews wants to be an actor. And I was and when we were growing up, being an actor was like a death sentence, right? That was no one wanted that. But now there's so much content being created. It makes sense. It's a viable.
There is. I think the ceiling is lower. Like, I think the economics for talent, the ceiling is lower, but I think it's never been easier to be a working actor than it is right now. But I do think we're at a weird moment where these streaming services are going through this belt tightening of, what is content from them going to look like, 5 years from now. And then what happens, is network television literally just going to be live sports? Is it just going to be, we do football of some varietal, we do the XFL, we do the USFL, we do 15 other leagues, and then every other, I mean, this is a weird thing to talk about in Mastering Innovation, but one of my biggest passions is wrestling. There is wrestling on network television every night of the week. You've got wrestling on cable on USA on Mondays, USA on Tuesdays, Turner on Wednesdays, Big Fox on Fridays, and then you've got Impact that's on, Access on Thursdays. So I think it's an interesting time for niche things to kind of get into the world. But what I hope is, and something I want to think about a lot in these next couple of years, is how do we get independent cinema kind of rolling again, utilizing sort of this availability of, more available technology and those kinds of things.
Well, people are so impatient. I think that's part of it, is that they don't want to wait 2 hours to get the tearjerker ending anymore. Right.
True, but how good was Top Gun, man?
Exactly.
I feel like this is a men of a certain age mantra, but there's nothing better than sitting back and watching that movie and being transported into your childhood and, go on that journey. When it's done well, you can binge all the content in the world. Being in that room for that collective sort of Plato's Cave experience of looking at that image on the wall, there's no better experience in the world.
And I love the action, but the indie films generally are more conversational, right? It's the old drama. And frankly, my kids have no patience for drama, right? Yeah. And if there's not an explosion or a car chase, I don't think it's happening.
It's a little weird. You do wonder if the movies that we grew up loving, what they would do today. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know if The Godfather, for example, would be dealt with or be at the level of reverence that it should be.
Yeah, it would be a short.
Yeah, it would be a short, and they would have trouble financing the full feature.
Well, that's going to be the next step of Mastering Innovation, is figuring out how to finance all this. So
yeah, no, that's the 4-hour podcast.
All right, Scott Schafer, thanks for Mastering Innovation together with us today. Thank you for Mastering Innovation together today with Thorben Consulting. This is Chris Koomey. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy the show, if you have any comments, questions, or just want to learn more about what we do. Thanks for joining us.